Well, this week's episode of Orange County begins with boobs. Lots of them. Because the ladies all go to get mammograms together. Gina's never had one, meanwhile Shannon's overdue by about 10 years. The women all meet up at the hospital, and once they're settled in the waiting room, Gina says to Shannon, "Hey, did you ever send that text to Alexis?" You know what text. The one that ends with, "And I want to make it clear that you are not invited." And Shannon says, "Yes, I did. I actually sent it when I got home." And then Jen says, "I was actually with her when she got that text," and she flipped out. Jen's exact words were, "She went batshit crazy and actually kicked mine and Katie's asses out the door." And then Shannon says, "And last night I actually received a text back, and it says, 'Hi, shannonbeador. Since you're hosting this amazing trip to Europe with our friends, surely you can scrounge up the funds to pay my future husband his $75,000 back that you borrowed and owe him. Safe travels.'" Jen says, "I truly think that she thought that she was coming." And Shannon says, "Well, then she's #delusional." Then the doctor comes in and Jen speaks up and says, "Hey, I already have a lump. I know about it." So the doctor takes her first and determines that that lump is actually just probably scar tissue or something from a previous surgery. Then she tells Heather that her tests were clear, but what she does have is a very high estimated risk for breast cancer. A normal number is 12 and Heather is 39. And Heather's rattled about it, but she's even more rattled about the fact that her friends didn't ask about her results. Then the doctor gives Gina the all clear, Shannon the all clear, and then the ladies are out of there. And then we're over at Katie's while she's packing, because packing is just what we seem to be doing a lot of these days. A lot. Katie says she's never been to England and she's wondering what they'll do. Her daughter suggests that her and Tamra just take off and go exploring. And then she goes on to tell her mom that England is an island, but England is not an island. Great Britain, that's an island. Then we're with Shannon while she's packing, because more packing. And then guess what? Tamra's packing too. And telling Eddie about what happened with Jen at Shannon's tea party. Speaking of Jen, she's packing too, and telling Ryan, about everything that went down at that tea party with Tamra. Then Eddie asks Tamra for just one favor: to not get into fights with little bitches anymore. And it's time to jet off to jolly old London. And while we're in the air, Emily brushes her teeth with Dr. Pepper. And Heather plays flight attendant and announces to the entire plane that it's Shannonbeador's birthday. The ladies land, they head to the hotel, and once they arrive, Shannon proclaims that the Duchess of Del Mar has arrived and that these are her ladies in waiting. Shannon's little display fell flat. Very flat. The girls sit down for sandwiches where they pull room keys, and then once the women arrive to those rooms, they all find a Burberry scarf from Shannon. Half of the women love their gift, the other half wish that they could donate it back to the John Jansen Facelift Fund. And then it's time for a boat ride down the Thames. And yes, it's the Thames and not the Thames. Trust me, I used to be married to a Brit, darling. The boat ride goes smooth, but then as it speeds up and starts going sideways, Heather starts freaking out. Emily, on the other hand, is loving it. The boat ride ends, the girls head back to the hotel, and once they get there, everyone started getting ready for dinner. Half of the girls were getting their glam done, and half of the girls were doing their own glam. And Jen and Emily took particular notice of the fact that Jen, who claims to be the brokest of the bunch, was getting her glam professionally done. Make it make sense? On the way to dinner, Gina and Emily stop by to pick up Shannon, who still isn't ready. She starts ratting her hair frantically, and Gina says to her, "The back of your hair looks like the last year of your life." As the ladies all sit down to dinner, Emily cracks her kneecap on the table, and then Tamra brings up the fact that everyone went to get their mammograms. And I have to say, I feel like this whole line of questioning by Tamra was actually planted by Heather. I think she told Tamra to bring it up so she could give everyone a little scolding. She checked in with all the girls about their results, and then she turned to Heather and says, "I didn't hear about yours." And Heather says, "Well, no one actually asked me about mine." And then Tamra says, "Well, I'm asking you." And then immediately Shannon is confused and says, "Wait a minute, Heather. We heard cheering coming from your room." And Heather says that cheering was for Gina. And then Shannon presses on and says, "Well, what is it then?" And so Heather goes on to tell her about her increased breast cancer risk. The whole table is shocked when they hear her numbers. And Tamra says, "Well, when you have numbers like that, can you just get a preventative vasectomy or something?" I heard vasectomy. Did you hear vasectomy? Let me know. Then Heather starts getting upset as she recounts the fact that she was in that room when everyone was asking everyone else about their results, and she got really choked up talking about the fact that no one turned to her and said, "What happened with you?" Everyone apologizes, including Gina, who also goes on to make a side note about the fact that she thinks Heather's being a hypocrite. Then Katie speaks up and says that hearing about Heather and her family's breast cancer really strikes a chord with her because that's one thing that she really wishes she had, a medical history. And given the fact that she's adopted, she doesn't. But then she goes on to tell the table that for her 40th birthday, her and Matt and their daughter are all heading to Korea so that she can finally meet her birth mother. Katie says that if she had to give up her baby for adoption, all she'd want to know was that they were raised right and loved and cared for and provided for. And she just wants her mom to know that she had a super life and she's fine and she's thankful. And meanwhile, tears are streaming down her face. But you know, navigating those mother wounds and the scar tissue that grows around them is not an easy job. Heather says, wow, I'm excited for you. I can't wait to hear the update. Heather goes on to ask a couple more questions. And in the background, Emily's going, to which Heather felt the need to respond and said, listen, I was asking her questions about her mother because it's interesting. Too bad she's not. Then Tamra turns to Shannon and says, what's up with your lawsuit? And Heather says, do we have to talk about this? And Emily says, well, she loves to talk about it, don't you, Shannon? And Shannon says, love to talk about it? No. And everybody goes, well, you just talked about it on Jeff Lewis. And Tamra goes, you talked about it on Jeff's show for an hour, Shannon. And Shannon says, listen, I have the absolute right to say that what is getting put out there about me is wrong. People are saying I borrowed $75,000 for a facelift, and I didn't. There is no promissory note. There was nothing discussed beforehand. And then a couple days later, he sent me a promissory note, and I was livid. Heather suddenly looks a little confused because this is the first that she's ever heard of a promissory note. But then to camera, Tamra says, I know it was a loan, and I know that it was a loan because Shannon told me so. So I see his point of view. I'd probably sue her ass too. Then Shannon starts to spew more and then stops herself because, you know, I shouldn't be saying anything. I'm in a lawsuit. And everybody jumps down her throat and says, you were just on Jeff Lewis for an hour. And then she told everyone that her attorneys said it was okay. Then Tamra says, and you also told a lie. And Shannon says, what did I lie about? And Heather says, well, I'm not sure if it was exactly a lie, but that night that we were in Sonoma, when you came to my room and showed me that bloodied picture of your face. And Shannon goes, don't go there, Heather. And Heather says, I just don't understand, because then when you were on Jeff's show and he brought it up and said, hey, do you think it's possible that maybe John actually heard the crash? You said you'd never even thought of that. Meanwhile, you came to my room and said that exact thing to me in Sonoma. Shannon says, I trusted Heather to confide in, and now I'm sure that I made a mistake. Gina says, this is heavy stuff, man. And Shannon said, it's more than that. This is a reality show seeping into my real life. And Heather goes, well, isn't this our real life? And I heard everybody except Gina and Shannon say, it's my real life. Then a sobbing Shannon turns to Heather and says, I went to you because I thought you were my friend. And Tamra says, you're not the fucking victim, Shannon. Shannon says, no, I'm the fucking asshole. She gets up, she storms out, and heads to the bar, but not before turning to Tamra and saying, I already told you I'm working on myself. Then Gina followed Shannon to the bar where Shannon ordered a vodka and went on to tell Gina that she actually found a text from Alexis from 2018 that said, you will be hearing from our attorneys tomorrow.